Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Benefits Buzz. I'm your host, Nathan Coverstone. It's pretty amazing to think that it's been 20 years since health savings accounts were signed into law back in 2003. But the 20th anniversary of HSAs marks a significant milestone in the life of these accounts that really empower tens of millions of Americans to save for current and future medical needs and make more informed healthcare decisions. As we celebrate this anniversary, it's evident that HSAs have become an integral part of the employee benefits landscape and will continue to play a vital role in improving the medical and financial needs of your employees. Today, Chris Byrd, Senior Vice President, Health Executive at WEX, joins us to discuss the growth of HSAs over the past 20 years, some HSA misconceptions that still exist, and his predictions for how HSAs will continue to evolve in the future. Chris, great to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you, Nathan. I'm looking forward to this.
I'm really excited to have the opportunity to talk to you. I just really am looking forward to the opportunity to pick your brain about all things health savings accounts.
So let's start by talking about why we decided to celebrate HSA Day. It's October 15th. There are two reasons why we chose October 15th, by the way. One is it's exactly 6 months after tax day, and HSAs have significant tax advantages. And the second is it coincides with the beginning of most employers' open enrollment season, which is when employees make those very, very important decisions about their benefits for the following year. But it's really a day for people to learn about the value that HSAs, health savings accounts, can bring to employees, to their families, and to encourage employees to enroll in the HSA and to fully utilize the HSA. And although we talk a lot to employers and we talk a lot to brokers, the most important audience here is consumers. It's those employees and their families, because ultimately this is a consumer product that is utilized by and is beneficial to those employees and their families.
I love you calling that out right out the gate, Chris, that really this is a consumer-driven benefit, and it's something that the individual can take advantage of. We love talking to our employers, and we love trying to help advise them on things that they can do better in their benefit space. But I really do appreciate that you called out that the HSA, it's really all about the consumer. So I want to start, if possible, to talk a little bit about the growth of HSAs over this past 20 years. Can you shed a little bit of light of what that growth has looked like?
Yeah, over the last 3 years, for example, the assets in health savings accounts have increased at an annual rate of over 17%. And at the end of last year, according to Devenir, who publishes the best industry survey, those assets were over $100 billion. So that was a significant milestone, much like the 20-year milestone. But I think it's important to understand why HSAs have been so popular and why they've grown. And unfortunately, you have to start by talking about the challenge. The challenge is out-of-pocket healthcare expenses. And it's interesting because just this week, I read a news article and there was a study published, and out-of-pocket expenses have been cited by individuals, by Americans, as the biggest barrier to their seeking care when they need care. And that's a real problem. And that's a problem that exists out there. It's not likely to go away anytime soon. But the reason why health savings accounts have proven so popular and why they continue to grow is because health savings accounts can really help people manage that challenge in two ways. First, by giving them a way of saving in little chunks out of their payroll to make sure that they have that money there when they need it. And the second is to lower their costs through the tax savings at HSA.
It's fascinating to think about. You're 100% correct. I know certainly that with my own family, I dread the inevitable accident that one of my sons will have that will require us to go to urgent care. But it has become more expensive. So I guess one of the things I'm also very curious about is if I'm experiencing that, I'm sure everybody has, to your point. So how has the personal utilization of the HSA kind of evolved as we've seen some of these prices increase, and just maybe in a general sense?
Well, I think one thing is that utilization of HSAs continues to increase. And by utilization, I mean that the average amount that somebody puts in every year the average amount that they take out every year, and the average balances continue to grow year over year over year. But I would say that there hasn't necessarily been a huge evolution in the way people have used these accounts. So much there's been an evolution in our understanding as providers in this industry about how people are utilizing their accounts. And we've done a lot of work here at WEX, for example, to try to understand that huge 15 million plus HSA community that we have on our platform. And what we found is that, not surprisingly, just like the population at large, there isn't one profile of a health savings account user. We have actually identified 7 distinct profiles of an HSA account owner. And it's everything from somebody that's just getting started to somebody who spends every dollar that they put in every year because they have to somebody on the other end of the spectrum who never spends a dollar and saves and invests it all for future healthcare expenses, perhaps even into retirement, and a lot of sort of hybrids and stages in between. And so, what we're finding is that people are in different cohorts, and so the way that they look at these accounts, the way they interact with them, the way they use them is very different. But the other thing that's very interesting is that we've been tracking this over time for a few years now, and what we're finding is that individuals will move from one cohort to another over time. And that's really, if you think about it, those are life stages, life events, changes in financial circumstance. There's lots of different things that can influence why somebody is at a particular place with respect to their health savings account at a given point in time.
Well, that is actually pretty interesting. I know that there have been years that I've certainly used my HSA more than other years, and there's been years that I've been a little bit better at saving. But I guess I really didn't recognize that there were 7 different kind of cohorts that people could fall into, and that I'm not unique in kind of having to use my HSA differently from time to time.
You bet it.
Well, I want to switch gears a little bit if we could, Chris. I'm really interested in HSA trends. What kind of trends have you seen with regard to the HSA, specifically over maybe the past couple of years?
Well, I think one of the things that I'm going to build on what I was just talking about. We finally have taken a consumer-directed benefit, and we're truly starting to focus on the consumer. And you might say, what took you so long? But the reality is that's really where our focus is today. And I talked about understanding the consumer, but that's only the first part of the journey, right? It's understanding the consumer, and then it's educating the consumer, and if you will, motivating the consumer to take an action that will be good for her. And so, we have looked at this, and a couple of things that I'll cite. The first is we conducted a study here at WEX of employee participants and employee benefits. And I guess not surprisingly, we found that HSAs were a resounding number 1 among the benefits that people want more information about. There's another survey that I just saw a couple of weeks ago that indicated that only 34% of the respondents in this particular survey characterize themselves as being very familiar with health savings accounts. So those of us who work in the industry, I think we understand these accounts very well, and we don't think that they're complex. But the average individual, the average employee out there trying to navigate, is finding HSAs to be more complex than we find them to be, because they don't eat and breathe them every day. And so we're really focusing on trying to educate consumers. Part of this is what we would call, it's kind of a consumer marketing term, personalization, right? Everybody does it. Amazon does it, for example, and the people like you, and they suggest things that you might like to look at. Sure. And this is, understanding where somebody is, and then designing messages that will be relevant to them based upon their circumstances. So if I'm a spender, the message that's going to land with me is going to be different than if I'm a saver and an investor, for example. And so to get those messages that are going to be relevant to that individual and in a language that's going to land with them. And there's a lot of sort of testing and learning that goes on with that process. But, we're seeing some encouraging results. And I'll just give you one really cool example. So we've developed this cool tool at WEX called My HSA Planner, and it's pretty simple in concept. You go through the planner and you answer a number of questions. You have some inputs, and it comes out and it says, based upon what you're telling me, we would recommend that this is how much you should put into your health savings account. This is how much per paycheck. This is how much per year. The challenge is getting people to use the tool. And so we went out with an outreach campaign where we were trying to get people to use the tool. And we were very targeted in the messages that we gave to different people. And we found that the results were pretty astounding. There was a 22% increase in people using the tool compared to a control group. And here's the amazing thing. So think about HSAs where, the average amount that somebody puts into a health savings account is well under $2,000 a year. This group that went through and completed the tool, they increased their contribution by nearly $500 a year. So that was a real big change in behavior that came from that particular outreach effort.
Wow. And really, at the end of the day, grounded in increased education, increased comfort and understanding around the HSA. And that drove those kinds of results.
Yeah, it really was pretty amazing.
That is very amazing. That kind of begs the question for me, though, a little bit. I recognize that HSAs have been around for 20 years, but it seems like, to your point, there's a lot of misunderstandings and maybe even some misconceptions around the HSA. Would you agree with that, Chris?
Oh, I think there are a ton of them. Some of them are what I would call technical, and they've been around forever. So I think that a lot of individuals still don't understand they own the health savings account. Their employer doesn't, and that's where it differs from, let's say, a flexible spending account. You take it with you. You own it just like you own a bank account. The second one is that HSAs are use it or lose it accounts, like flexible spending accounts. The reality is, no, those funds go with you, and you can use them now, or you can use them 10 years from now, or you can use them 30 years from now. But some of the others are a little bit more nuanced. There's been, I think, a misunderstanding of health savings accounts. And this is not only among consumers, but it's among, I think, government officials as well, that HSAs are really only for the wealthy. They're a tax dodge for the wealthy, and that most of the people who use health savings accounts are extremely well-to-do individuals. The reality is very different. 75% of the people who own a health savings account have a household income of under $100,000, and the median is in the 70s, and that places this as a very middle class benefit. And the reason for that is because, again, going back to our 7 different personas, people use these accounts very differently, and that leads me to another misconception about health savings accounts, which is that health savings accounts are primarily a retirement account. And I think, honestly, we as an industry, we bear all of the blame for that, because from the very beginning, the industry has pounded home this message that, HSAs are a great way to build retirement savings. You're going to need retirement savings for healthcare once you retire. But I have to tell you, if I had $1 for every time I've read an article or a blog post that says something to the effect of, if you don't invest your HSA, you're stupid, I'd be a wealthy man. And quite frankly, at this point, I think we find it a little bit offensive, because the reality is there are people who make $20,000 a year, $30,000 a year, $40,000 a year who are enrolling in HSAs, and they're using HSAs. And they're using them to discipline, put away that emergency savings, and lower their costs. And for them, the ability to save for retirement is something that may come later, but they can't even deal with that right now, because they're having to deal with, how do I pay the electric bill?
Sure.
How do I pay my rent? How do I put food on the table for my kids? And oh, by the way, how do I save for my health care?
Yeah, absolutely. So where do you think that these misconceptions continue to come from? I mean, why do they still exist after 20 years? I guess I don't understand why these are still prevalent in society when there's been plenty of time to kind of dispel them.
I think this is where we really have to be honest with ourselves as an industry. I frankly think that we have not done as good a job of educating people as we should. And that's why this consumer understanding and this consumer messaging and motivation effort, that quite frankly, we're in the early innings of that. That's why that's so important. And that's why I'm so encouraged by where we're going at WEX. We're leading the industry in that effort, but where the entire industry seems to be going and where it needs to go.
Well, then that sounds like a perfect segue, Chris. Let's talk about HSA communications and education. So what's the best way to communicate to employees or educate populations about health savings accounts so they can actually take advantage of this powerful tool?
It's a great question. And I was on a panel a couple of weeks ago down in Nashville, and the opening question, if you could do one thing to make HSAs a better product, what would you do? And my answer was real simple. No pun intended. We have to simplify HSAs. We have to make them more understandable. Now, I don't mean that we need to simplify HSAs as a product, because they are what they are.
Sure.
There are rules and regulations around health savings accounts, but we need to simplify the way that we present this product to people. That's number one. And there's a couple of things there. One is language really matters. We have largely promoted this product in a language that a compliance attorney would love, but it's not language that the typical consumer, that it would really resonate with that person. We say things like triple tax free. Well, I have to tell you, I saw a public opinion survey, and triple tax free resonated with less than 5% of the people.
Wow.
It just didn't land, right? We say things like portability. The average person, I've sat in focus groups, they have no idea what portability means. That's a technical term. The worst one is high deductible health plan. You have to have a high deductible health plan to help out health savings accounts. Boy, you talk about a trigger phrase, that scares the bejesus out of people, right? So how do people talk about these accounts? They use words like, it's a safety net, it's a security blanket, it gives me a sense of control, it makes me feel smart. People don't talk about tax savings. You know what people say? I got it on sale. It's like I was walking down the sidewalk and I looked down and I tripped over a $10 bill. This is the way people talk. And so we need to approach people in the language that is going to connect with them. People don't connect with these accounts up here. They don't intellectually connect with them. They emotionally connect with them. And the reason that they do is because health savings accounts exist at the intersection of two of the most emotional things in a person's life: your health care and your personal finances. And we need to recognize that. The second thing is we are coming up on that time of year when most employers do go through their open enrollment process. Now, while we should be communicating about health savings accounts all year round, and people can change their decisions at any time, open enrollment is the prime opportunity. That's when people really take time to reflect on their benefits. And so we have that opportunity. Let's leverage that. Let's capitalize that. And then finally, making sure that we're not only using the right language, but we are landing the right message for each person based upon where they are in their life journey.
Wow, that makes just a ton of sense. So really communicate the way people want to be communicated with at the time that they need that communication, in the method and manner that will resonate the most with that individual. Did I summarize that really?
You summarized it perfectly, Nathan, and far more succinctly than I did. But you would think this stuff is easy, right? I mean, just makes common sense. And if you go to almost any other aspect of the American economy, people understand this. We've just been a little bit late to the game here in health benefits.
Sure. Well, but I like it because it's something that we can absolutely do. We can all think about communication. We can kind of wrap our arms around that and really evaluate, hey, how am I communicating this to my employees? How am I communicating this to my consumers to ensure that they're actually getting the most out of this wonderful benefit? What else do you think an employer can do, Chris, to make it a little bit, I don't know, more educated or to help educate their people a little bit more?
Well, I would say if there's one thing that I would ask an employer to do, if you're not making a contribution to your employee's health savings account today, start making a contribution. As an employer, you're lowering your benefit costs, your premiums on an HSA qualified plan are lower than if somebody enrolls in a traditional PPO. Share some of that savings back with your employees. The reason is, number one, it's the right thing to do, but number two, it actually helps to motivate employee behavior. So one of the real advantages that we have here at WEX is we've got this massive database of health savings accounts going back decades now. And we have the ability to not only mine that database, but trendline that database. And we have looked at our 2022 data, for example, and we have found that an employer contribution of as little as $50 can actually end up motivating employees to participate and enroll in the health savings account. But we've also tested, what are some optimal levels? And the optimal levels seem to be 1,500 to 1,750 employer contribution to a family coverage individual, and half that amount, 750 to 1,000 for somebody who is covered as an individual. That tends to yield the highest employee contribution. So it's not strictly a matching concept, but it's a little bit of a, let's see the HSA, let's get people in the game, and people will actually contribute their own money to it, which is the right thing for them to do.
That is so interesting. I mean, if an employer was looking to try to drive up their HSA enrollment, $50 seems like a pretty inexpensive way to at least experiment to see what the results would be.
Precisely.
That's really interesting. All right, Chris, while I've got you, now I'm really interested about your thoughts as we go into the future. I feel like I should be able to do like a Johnny Carson moment here for a moment, but how do you see HSAs evolving and the utilization evolving to better meet an individual's healthcare in the future?
Well, we talked a lot about education and we talked about messaging, and we believe that both of those are going to increase adoption and utilization, even within the universe of people who today could have a health savings account. There's a real opportunity here. There's an opportunity for employers. There are studies that have been published that show that between 30 and 40% of people who could have a health savings account, and that's defined as they're in a health savings account qualified health insurance plan, they either haven't yet established an HSA, or if they have one, they have not made a contribution to it. We have some evidence that some people actually take their employer contribution and then don't make a contribution of their own. We've also done an outreach campaign there, and we got really good lift of people. We found that 70% of the people that we reached out to in our test group actually ended up making a contribution to their HSA. So I think we will see more utilization even from the embedded list of potential users, and I think those who have it will continue to utilize it more fully once they better understand how to use the account and the benefits of using the account fully.
So let me ask you this then. Do you anticipate any regulatory changes that could impact utilization of an HSA or growth of an HSA in coming years?
I think right now in the legislative arena, we're in kind of a quiet period. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, HSAs are here to stay. They enjoy broad support. But I don't see in the near to intermediate term, I don't see any radical changes. I think what we will see is we'll see the potential for some moderate, what I would call common sense expansion of access to health savings accounts. And that really breaks down into two different categories. The first is unserved populations. So people who, based on their circumstances today, can't enroll in an HSA. So Native Americans, for example, who receive their health care from the Indian Health Services, veterans who receive their health care from the VA, military enrolled in TRICARE, senior citizens who are working past age 65, Medicare eligible, and want to stay on their employer's plan and continue to enroll in the health savings account. So that would be an expansion of access to populations that today are not able to enroll in an HSA. And I think we've had some and continue to have some very fruitful conversations on that. And then the second one is continued flexibility in plan design. There's been a little bit done there, but think about one of the things that's interesting is you mentioned that HSAs were enacted into law 20 years ago. Well, part of that enactment was some very rigid guidelines around what the insurance can and cannot cover, and what the minimum deductibles, for example, have to be. And I like to call that legislated plan design. And what we're trying to push for and making some progress is to really have the market define what the HSA plan should cover. And so, for example, certain chronic conditions, can we cover those before somebody's reached their deductible? Perhaps even an actuarial value test that says, hey, as long as it's not a really rich plan, as long as the consumer still has skin in the game, let the insurer and let the employer decide what's the right mix of benefits that I can cover based upon the needs of my particular employee population. The radical idea is something called decoupling. We've talked about it before, and it would allow anybody to have a health savings account, whether they have a high deductible HSA qualified plan or not. That's not likely to happen for two reasons. One is it would cost a lot of money, and the federal government is very challenged there. And the second is that the philosophy behind which health savings accounts were established was the consumer needs to have some skin in the game. And so that philosophy still exists among lawmakers. And so this idea that anybody could have a plan, no matter how rich it is, and still have a health savings account doesn't resonate with those people.
I want to talk about something that you mentioned earlier, which is the increased medical costs for treatments, just the overall increase in healthcare costs. How do you think the HSA could accommodate more comprehensive coverage while still maintaining that focus on savings and being tax advantaged?
I think it's coming back to opening up that flexibility for what can the HSA qualified insurance cover without somebody having to have satisfied their deductible, so that the insurer and the employer can tailor their coverage more intelligently. It's market-based plan design versus legislated plan design. But regardless of where you go with that, there still needs to be some sort of a floor. The consumer still does need to have a stake in the outcome and have some financial stake. And so I don't think that you're going to see an opening up of HSAs to people who have very rich plans. But I do think you'll see the best way to do it is to give more flexibility in what that health insurance plan can cover.
Sure. Well, since we're talking about the future of HSAs, I think it's only appropriate to bring that into one of my latest, nearest, and dearest topics, which is AI. Do you see any role for AI or data analytics to really play a role in optimizing HSA management, especially as it pertains to allowing individuals to make more informed decisions about their healthcare spending, so it really truly is consumer driven?
Nathan, I was wondering when you were going to get to that question. And I'm actually really glad you asked it. I guess we haven't done that good a job of tooting our own horn here. Maybe we're a little too humble. But we've been using generative AI for years. So this whole consumer pathways product that I described earlier, that is all built on generative AI. And then when we get into personalization and targeted relevant messaging, that's taking AI and combining it with predictive analytics, based upon the profile, what is likely to work with that person. And so we are continuing to use that. We're using ChatGPT for content generation now. But we've been using it for a number of years, and we continue to see it driving that effort forward as we go through the next few years.
That's fantastic. I'm always excited, and I do like that we get to toot our own horn a little bit during the episode. All right, Chris, since I've got you, I'm going to close with the question I like to ask everyone, which is there anything else that you would like to share about the importance of HSA Day, especially in the context that we're celebrating the 20th anniversary?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to start with the product itself. It is a wonderful, wonderful product. I love what I do. We love what we do because we're providing something that's really, really good for people. With a very real challenge. The challenge that we have as an industry and that we're trying to address here at WEX is the product that still doesn't emotionally connect well enough with people, and it's not well enough understood. But we're going to break through on that. I feel very, very confident. HSA Day, if I can say something to everyone in the audience, whether you're a broker, whether you're an employer, whether you work in the industry, it's a really important opportunity for everyone involved, whether you are a custodian, whether you're an administrator, whether you're a broker, whether you're an employer. Get the word out. Get the word out, not only to whoever you're talking to, but all the way down the line, I'll end where I started. This is really something that's designed to reach the consumer. It's a consumer product, and we need to be promoting it to the consumer. And this is a terrific opportunity for everybody involved in this industry to get involved in whatever way works best for you. I think that there are certain themes that we would stress, particularly around the words that work and the way you want to connect with people. But ultimately, this isn't about WEX's HSA or anybody else's HSA. It's about a product. It's about a product that will benefit all Americans who can participate, and that all Americans who can participate should.
Great insights. Thank you so much for being on the episode today, Chris. Your insights and your knowledge are truly appreciated, and it's just been great having you as a guest.
Well, thank you for asking, Nathan, and this has been a lot of fun.
Outstanding. And thank you all for tuning in today and listening to today's episode. If you haven't already, please subscribe to Benefits Buzz and leave us a review. We'd love to hear what topics would be of interest to you. Thanks, everyone.